Hello and welcome to the Winners Find a Way show. I am your host, Trent M. Clark. Wonderful to see you this week. Another fabulous episode of the Winners Find a Way show. I am the CEO of Leadershipity, a serial entrepreneur. I am a growth coach through and through, helping organizations double their value very quickly. If you want to know more about that, you're going to want to email me directly at trent@leadershipity.com. Always happy to take that appointment and talk growth. As a professional and entrepreneur, I've started already 14 businesses, sold 16 franchises, and 1-800-GOT-JUNK. And I am currently sitting as the president of EO West Michigan. That is the Entrepreneurs Organization. Love this world of athletics and entrepreneurship. And I am also the author of Leading Winning Teams. That is the book. And of course, you can find this on any of the major networks, all the bookstores, everywhere else, Amazon, and all the good stuff there. Wrote that and published by Wiley, but most people know me because I spent over 12 seasons in professional baseball coaching and 3 World Series. And today's a special day because Coach Trent gets to talk to Coach Jim Johnson. Coach Jim, how are you doing, man?
Doing awesome, Trent. Looking forward to this.
Oh man, me too. This is a really special day. Coach Jim Johnson has coached and been a basketball coach for over 35 years. And what's impressive is you've been married longer than that. Like I don't know how you did that. Usually we start as the coach in a young career, find a lady to marry. I figured you'd be coaching 45 and married 42, but you actually did the marriage first and then got into the coaching. Is that fair?
Yeah. Well, actually, I was coaching, but I retired, so I haven't accumulated the years. But our
There
marriage,
we go. Okay, there it is. That's the deal. All right, you're a retired coach, and the marriage continues, which is
yeah.
awesome. So super excited about that. Upstate New York guy. Jim grew up just outside of Rochester in Greece, New York. That is not the country. That is upstate New York. And it is cold, man. And man, when I think of Rochester and Greece, New York, I am not thinking hoops, man. I'm thinking hockey. I'm thinking cold weather sports because it's pretty chilly up there. Is that fair?
That is true. Yeah. Hockey's pretty big in our area for sure.
Yeah. So you have a son, now an attorney, proud father and mother of a young man out there in California making his way. So I love that. And man, so you have just done this a long, long time. And one of the reasons Coach Jim Johnson is famous is because he wrote a very good book called man, I can't even read that. What's it called?
A coach in a miracle.
Coach and a miracle. Yeah, I wrote that down wrong. A coach and a miracle. I wrote a coach in a miracle, which is kind of how it happened too, by the way. He's kind of in the miracle, but it was a coach in a miracle. And you're going to understand that whole story in just a moment. I'm going to show you a video. But you've also been featured in Chicken Soup for the Soul. You're newly featured in Lessons from Thoughtful Leaders, and you're featured in a chapter there. And so you've continued to develop not only your coaching, but your leadership and your voice in that space. Is that something you always felt called for as an educator?
Well, it was something, my dad was my high school basketball coach, so I kind of wanted to follow in his footsteps. And the only difference is he got into school administration after I played for him. I guess I tired him out. So I went in, and that's something I thought I would do, but I just fell in love with the coaching piece. So I ended up being a head coach for 30 years. And it was something I was extremely passionate about. So
I love it. Now, tell me real quickly, were you an outstanding basketball player yourself? Because I run into a lot of coaches. I was a Division I baseball player, right? And I went on and coached in professional baseball. I was not good enough to make the major leagues, clearly. So they gave me that, hey, you'd make a good coach, kid, making that job transition, right? So how were you as a basketball player?
Well, it's very unique because when I started to reflect, I was fortunate. Certainly, I didn't think this at the time with my various things, but I started really getting interested in basketball in my middle school years, and I was very small in back then, and so I was an okay player, but physically I was struggled because a lot of at middle school, kids are a lot more advanced physically. got into high school, started to grow a little bit. And so I ended up playing 3 years of varsity basketball. My sophomore year, I played off the bench. My junior year, I was a starter, but I was just, one of the guys. And then my senior year, I was the best player on the team. And then I went to college. I played 1 year and then got cut from my college team. So,
Wow. Okay.
so the interesting part for me, Trent, was that I really hit almost everything you can do as a player. And the fact that I've been cut, I've been one of the last guys on the team. I've been a guy that started. I've been a guy that came off the bench. I've also been the star 1 year.
Yeah.
So,
And you've probably been injured somewhere
yeah,
along the line where you got to get yourself back up and
right.
get healthy and miss that.
Yeah. So those were all things I think was really helpful in understanding all the different roles of all the different players I had over the years. So I think
I feel like I need to go back and talk to the SUNY Cortland coach and see this. I gotta get on this guy and
yeah,
talk a little bit about SUNY Cortland. What were you doing, man? Like, how could you cut this guy? So
yeah,
you did that. You're a graduate of SUNY Cortland education. You also did your master's at Brockport.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So man, you're just a New Yorker through and through.
Yeah,
Probably a Yankee fan too, for God's sakes.
It's funny. I was a Yankee fan as a kid, but now I've kind of switched to the Mets. I don't know. That doesn't happen too
Wow.
often.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, when they start shelling out, $1 billion, everyone starts getting behind it, right?
right.
So, like, that's great. Mets are having a good year. All right. So one thing that most people don't know about you, Jim, as probably a lifelong athlete, you love playing. Well, basketball is pretty taxing on the body, up and down. I know whenever I play basketball now, I'm sore like 3 days. My back hurts. Things that I didn't know I had hurt, right? Like when I play now at 55 years old, right? So it's a very unique deal. But you've transitioned to become a very avid tennis player. And most people don't know that about you. Talk about where that passion came from.
So it was actually interesting because, in my career, I started to hire, and you'll appreciate that because you did a lot of this work with strength and conditioning for Major League Baseball teams. Well, back in my era, strength coaches were just starting to grow. They're very big now, but when I first started. So I started to hire outside coaches. And so this guy was training my team, but his full-time job, he worked at a fitness tennis club. And he actually started to invite me down. And at this point, I'm in my late 40s, and I've dabbled with different lifetime sports. But I started to play tennis more regularly, and now I love it. I play like 3 or 4 times a week, and I could feel it on my body. But certainly, I right with you because I used to play basketball for a while, and there's a different pain after playing basketball.
Yeah. So. There's a different pain for sure. And tennis is tough. And now as a lifelong, I play a lot of pickleball, which I enjoy. And then, but the hard courts still do beat me up a little bit.
Yeah,
and
they do.
Man, if I had my druthers, and we're just coming off Wimbledon here a couple weeks ago here, right. So fabulous final there, right. And when we look at that, man, I highly encourage people. You're going to be a lifelong tennis player. You really need to find a clay court or grass because it's a lot easier on the body. Amazingly. I mean, for what a fractional thing is on a playability for surface, it has a significant more impact on the stress on your body.
Yeah, fortunately, I belong to a club in the winter, so I play 6 months, and it is clay, so that is helpful. So
nice, love it. Okay, excellent. So let's get into this. Jim, you're a high school coach for almost 25 years. And you became the high school coach of a very special human being who's just tell us a little bit about what you knew about J-Mac and why you brought him into the program before we hear the story.
Yeah, so J-Mac came into our program. I actually tagged his nickname because I couldn't pronounce his last name. Unfortunately, he liked it. So he tried out for our JVs as a sophomore. The school I finished my career, I coached there 20 years. It was called Greece Athena. And he tried out for our JV team. He did not try out his freshman year. He actually ran indoor track. And so I didn't know him. We were in a pretty big school. And so during tryouts his sophomore year, my JV coach came in and said, Coach, we got this young man that's so small in stature. He was like 5'6", 90 pounds. He's not very skilled. He's on the autism spectrum. He has learning disabilities, but I want to keep him in the program. I said, well, why? He says, because he has some of the ingredients you always talk about in getting the right people. He's a we over me guy. He'll do anything to help the team. He loves basketball. He's passionate. And so he gave him an opportunity to be the JV team manager. And during our season, the JVs and varsity, for the most part, always play back to back. Yeah. So I was getting to know Jason mainly just through the games. And, and he would get a little bit out of control during the JV game, but he wanted to sit on the bench during the varsity game. So one of our players would always go over and straighten his white shirt and black tie that he always wore to games. And he was much more calm during the varsity game. But then the thing that really turned me to Trent was between his sophomore and junior year, he came to all our off-season workouts, and he wanted to make the varsity team, and he loved it. And I started really getting close to him because I was very passionate about basketball as well. So I'd pick him up from his house. We've always talked basketball. So he tries out his junior year, and he's grown a little bit. He's like 5'8", maybe 100 pounds now. But so he wasn't good enough to make the team. But I asked him to be the team manager for the varsity. And he quickly embraced that role. And a funny little sidelight is at that point in my career, I was kind of known as the coach that couldn't win the big one. We were having consistent winning season, but we never won our sectional championship. In fact, I'd taken 5 different teams that were pretty good teams to the semifinals, and we lost every single one of them. So our first team meeting, Jason's junior year, he raises his hand and he goes, "Coach." I go, "Yeah, Jay Mac." He says, "We know you've never won the Section 5 championship." And I says, "Well, thanks, Jay, for the reminder." And he said, "But this year, we're going to help you win because we know you're big into slogans. And so our slogan is we're going to stay focused. And we're going to help you win the championship." Well, we have a good season. We get to the semifinals, Trent, now for the 6th time in my career, and we lose at the buzzer to our crosstown rival, and we were devastated. In fact, I lost it at home that night. Unfortunately, my wife was quite wise because at that point, I become a better leader. I had a personal mission statement, and she reminded me that my personal mission statement didn't mean that I had to win a Section 5 championship. So she did get me grounded. But then again, Jason came back to all our off-season work between his junior and senior year. And when he came out his senior year during trials, I brought him and I said, "J Mac, I got some good news and some bad news." He goes, "Coach, give me the bad news first." I go, "Unfortunately, you're still not quite good enough to make the team." And this time he's really visibly disappointed. You can see his head drop down. I said, "But I do have some good news." His head popped up immediately. He says, "What do you got in mind, Coach?" I said, "Well, for senior night, where we honor our seniors," and he knew all about it. He says, "Yeah, I'm going to give you a uniform so you can go through the ceremony before the game, and I'm hoping I can get you in the game." And he was pretty fired up about that uniform idea. In fact, periodically, he would ask me about that uniform. And of course, I defined periodically as about every other day. he was pretty fired up.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is, just to give you one quick context that we can get in the game or whatever you like to do, but is that we were expected to have a really good team. And we started that year off, we won a tip-off tournament. We were 2-0, and then adversity struck. And it's a long story, but the bottom line is our team got divided. Yeah. And we really went into a funk in our next 5 games. I thought we'd win all of them. We lost 3 of them. And it was really a struggle. And a leadership tip I share with people is we had a Christmas tournament, and we went to this school called Fairport, which is the largest school in Rochester, and they were really good that year. And we both won in the opening round, but Fairport beat the team we had barely beaten a week earlier. They beat them by 40 points. Wow. So we had a shoot around the next day, which is a short practice. And normally at a shoot around, we'll bring basketballs out and do some shooting drills and go over a few plays and get ready for the game. And I knew that wasn't going to work. So I shocked him. I sat him on the bleachers. We didn't bring a basketball out. And I told them, "I don't want to go to the game tonight." And they looked at me like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, unless we decide we're going to unite, we're going to lose by 40 points tonight." And I talked about, Jason's commitment. I tried to inspire him, but the best thing I did, and you teaching leaders, this is important, is I became vulnerable. I said, "Guys, I don't have the answers. You got to be willing to share how we're going to unite." And it seemed like I waited 5 minutes, Trent. It was probably 30 seconds, and somebody from the team shared an idea. And then by the end of that hour, everyone got some input and they felt like they were being heard.
Mm.
And it manifested that night, even though we had not brought a basketball out during that hour practice. We actually played a great game. We didn't win the game, but we lost in overtime, and it showed what we could do. And then we went on a hot streak, and we won 8 out of our next 9, going into our final home game, which was senior night.
That's awesome. I gotta tell you, man, like it's so inspiring. Like one, and I see J Mac in that passion for playing and that very glimpse that I'm gonna get to wear the uniform one game. Like I know
Right.
it. And
Yeah.
we talk a lot about goal setting and planning and I love Coach Manny talked about this day for that day. What are you doing this day for that day? And that day could be 30 days away. That day could be, for me, it was 4 years ago away, because when I was in 8th grade, I'm like, hey, I got to get signed after my junior year.
Right.
I got to get a college scholarship. So 360 times 4, right? You're talking about almost 1,500 days of that,
Right.
of this day. What will you do this day? So when finally that college coach, a Coach Johnson, calls me up and says, yes, Trent, we want you a part of our team, and here's your scholarship, and it's a big day. So I can imagine J-Mac's excitement for that day, which, by the way, a high school season is not bad. It's about 120 days, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so he's not having to wait a year,
Right.
but it's coming. So
Yeah.
I can visibly see the every other day, reminder,
Right. Right.
because he's staying focused on this day. So
Yeah.
let's get into a little bit of the story here, and I'm going to share this clip.
Okay.
What we all want in life is a shot. But what we do with it, that's the story we all want to tell.
I've coached for 25 years, and I've never experienced that, the emotional high of what happened.
What happened for Jason McElwain, or J-Mac as his friends call him, is about more than a shot. Diagnosed with autism at 2 years old, now identified as highly functioning, he's never considered himself different or separate, especially when it comes to sports.
Sports has always been, how could I say, his equalizer. He's just like any of the other kids out there.
It's not really a big deal at all. I'm just normal like other people. That's the way I am.
At 5'6", J-Mac didn't make the junior varsity basketball team at his high school, Greece Athena, near Rochester, New York. Instead, he became team manager, a role he now has for the varsity as a senior. In the last 3 years, in his white shirt and black tie, he's missed only one game.
Go in practice, I set up the clock and get the water in games and be enthusiastic.
As this season was wrapping up, Coach Johnson approached Jason with an idea about the Trojans' final home game of the season.
I said, I'm really going to look to try to get you in the game, but remember, I can't promise you that. And he goes, okay, Coach.
February 15th, Greece Athena against Spencerport, senior night. With word out that Jason might play, the student section printed signs of J-Mac's face, just in case. And with 4:19 left in the game, with the Trojans up by 20, Coach called down to the end of the bench for number 52.
I just kind of turned and pointed at him, and he almost ran right on the court. He was so excited.
Hey, Jay, you got to check in. So he hits the buzzer, and he doesn't go anywhere. It's like, now you go on the court. He was so caught up in the moment.
He came into the game. They all stood up and they put the signs, the pictures of him up, and I got really emotional. And I sat down and started to cry.
With 3:46 left, Jason got the ball.
When he missed that first three, I was like, oh, and then it airball, and I was like, man, I really just want to see him score one time.
I put my head in my hands, like, dear God, please, just get him a basket.
Then, with 3:12 left, another chance.
That third trip down the court, magic.
As soon as I started hitting my first shot, I just kept shooting, and I was just hot as a pistol.
Shot. after shot after shot kept going in.
The basket was like this big, huge bucket, and I was shooting like they were free throws. It was just a big, huge bucket that's like huge.
And I was like, oh my God, is this really happening? He has more points than me, so he's got bragging rights over me.
He was unstoppable for that moment in time. He was unstoppable.
He comes down the court right at the end with like 3 seconds left, and he hits this one that's, you know, probably like an NBA three. As soon as the gun ended, they stormed the court. You know? I couldn't, you know, I just couldn't dream anything like that.
It felt like we won a championship. Everyone was just so happy for me.
In that 4 minutes, 19 seconds, Jason was 7 for 13, 6 of 10 from three-point range, 20 points in all. In his first and only varsity basketball game, J-Mac was the high scorer.
Truly the most incredible moment I've ever had in coaching. I was so touched, and it was just so special to me that a young man, his dream came true, you know, and that I could help that. It was awesome.
What we all want in life is a shot. J-Mac took his, and now it's a story we can all tell.
Man, I just love it, man. I get like, as soon as the story starts, right? I get goosebumps, man. I'm
Yeah.
like, this is crazy because, you know, I remember it. I remember seeing the story on ESPN, and yeah, it was 2006, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I just remember seeing the story and how powerful the story was at the time. And man, it's just, it's so cool just to feel like that moment for this young man. And you know, when you talk about this, here's a kid who just loves it, man. It's the passion, and it's, you know, preparation meets opportunity, right? He did all the off-season work. You know,
Right.
he did all.
Yeah.
By the way, could have used the 20 another 10 nights, coach. By the way, I don't know, right? But you know, looking back on that moment, what do you think happened? I mean, just what do you think happened with it, coach? Is it a miracle? Is it a God thing? Tell me what happened.
Well, I am a believer in God, so I do believe that was a miracle. I think the interesting part back in that time, you know, autism was starting to be more prevalent,
Yeah.
but, you know, they still have a lot of questions to be answered about autism, you know, although they're finding more. But back then, a lot of people were losing hope, you know, with their children on the autism spectrum. And this is my belief. I just think it was God's way of saying, I'm going to create a miracle because I want to give people hope.
Yeah.
You know, and so that, you know, it's funny because it hit me because a month, probably 6 weeks after that season, people started reaching out, and I developed a speech called "Dreams Really Do Come True," where I talked about Jason's game and, you know, some keys that, you know, because I had done a lot of my own personal growth, so my observations of things. But you know, the crazy thing is that. After that game, at that point, the only thing I did had no media there. You know, I felt like it was just the right thing to do, but I had to call it in a local newspaper because back then, you know, they would do a box score and use a little article, and they didn't make much of a deal about it. And I'd tell you, the next day we watched the game film the whole day in my classes. So, and kids were going crazy. They said it was going to get on ESPN. And I said, if we can get a headline in our Democrat and Chronicle newspaper. But you really, you know, you talk about taking a village. It was Jason's speech pathologist. I didn't know him very well. He came to the game and he called one of our local TV stations and said, you've got to borrow the video from the coach. And when they showed it that night, within another week, we were on Good Morning America. You know, I mean, after the season, we were on Oprah. I mean, it was, you know, we met the president of the United States. It was just crazy, one thing after another. But the other, you know, you talk about, one of the things I talk about is the essence of being a great team player. And Jason, because the rules in our sectional class was you had to play in 6 regular season games to be able to play in the postseason. So Jason's got to go back and be our manager, and yet he embraced that. And ironically, because I had a lot of people calling me from all over the country, and I remember this lawyer that wanted to represent me says, "Well, coach, I really add to the story if you win your championship." I said, "That's what I need, more pressure, right?" And ironically, we blew a 10-point lead in the semifinal game. My big obstacle, I'd taken 6 teams there, and we ended up rallying and winning. And then in the finals, we start the game down 13-3. But this team had just great resilience, and I was a better coach. I was more positive, and I handled the pressure better than I had in the past. And they responded, and we ended up winning in a close game for our first Section 5 championship. And then Jason actually came back and volunteered in my program, and we won 5 more of them together. So he was definitely my good luck charm, and we had quite a run my last decade in coaching. So yeah, it's, the thing that I learned so much from Jason was just the essence of perseverance, that you just keep staying with it and being ready for your opportunity. And certainly he sees that. And, but the cool thing for him is I remember Trent, after that season, we got interviewed a lot together on various things. And it's funny because he would shock them, because the interview would always want to talk about his game. So they say, "Hey, Jason, tell us about your best thing about your senior season." And of course, they were expecting him to talk about his game, and he would shock them. He'd say, "Oh, winning the Section 5 championship, that was the best thing."
Yeah. Like my game, whatever. Like we won the Section 5 championship. Yeah. That's funny. Like, but that's also the knowledge of the pure basketball passion he has. He gets as a team what's really important. Like, I had one big night one night, but big deal. We paid 34 of them, right? And so I love that. Talk to me a little bit about, the impact on high school kids, man, because high school kids are harsh. Man, they are a judgmental group. It's a tough environment. I mean, I know very few people who don't have some high school scars, and they're primarily emotional, right? And they're not physical. I'm not getting beat up at school. It's the things that people say. It's the being ostracized. It's the being different. And we haven't learned to celebrate those things yet. Those God-given strengths that give us and make us separate. And like, oh my gosh, you've got this great voice. Don't hide it. Celebrate. Well, people make fun of me. I don't want to be a choir kid.
Right.
But man, as the thing that kind of choked me up, Jim, is watching all those kids celebrate him.
Yeah. That was really cool because, our high school, wasn't perfect by any means, I would never say, but the thing that really touched my heart is how much they embraced him, even at the start. Like when I got choked up, on the video they shared that was what I didn't know when Jason went on the court for the first time. One of our parents, he was kind of our unofficial photographer. He got this idea to make these pictures of J-Mac's face and put them on paint sticks. And he gave them to our student body. They called themselves the Six Man. We had a pretty good following that year. And when Jason walks on the floor for the first time, they show all these placards. And I don't usually cry basketball games of coaching, right?
Yeah.
I sit down, which I rarely ever did, and tears are flowing down my face. I can't believe how he embraces it. And then
that support.
Yeah. And then, see how they, after the game, how they all ran on the court, the only thing I could think of is, oh my God, I'm living the movie Rudy.
Yeah. I mean, you really are. It is that kind of inspirational type story to a Rudy. I mean, it's definitely like in the same ballpark, right?
Yeah.
Like this is amazing. And in fact, I'm surprised they haven't done a movie about it yet. Like,
we've had our ups and downs. We have I'm working with a producer right now, so hopefully someday we'll see it on the big screen. So.
Yeah, I think it'd be really great, because we're seeing, and I think we are getting a lot more knowledgeable about autism, which is kind of a blessing and a curse. Like you're saying, there's so much more. And so you can't help but be aware, right? Because we need to be aware. It's a lot. And we also now recognize like, wow, there's a lot of different levels of just different things, from emotional to physical to cognitive to all these things. And I think that's good for people to understand and to get educated. I think one of the challenges I've always had with parents and coaches is the early developed kid. As a coach, you see a 10-year-old who's 6 feet tall, and the adults have no grace. They're like, I don't know why you act so immature, because you think he's 15 and
Right.
he's 10,
Yeah.
right? Like, he's 10 years old, and quite the opposite. I was the opposite kid, right, Jim? Which is
Yeah.
probably, a little bit of you in junior high, where
Right.
we were learning, like, we're the little guys. We got to work harder. We got to be quicker.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm even going to get a chance, I got to put in the work. So,
Right.
I started with that work ethic at such an early level.
Yeah.
And then you see some of the top athletes in the league, in the top leagues. They were little junior high kids.
Mhm.
And so they were like you and I. They developed their work ethic, and then they
Right.
grew to 6'5", and you're like, man, that dude's a really hard worker for 6'5". He goes, yeah, that's because I used to be 5'1" and 95
Right.
pounds.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
trying to
Yeah.
steal the ball and figure out what I'm going to do because I'm not going on the interior, right?
Right.
And so it's such a dynamic. And I was thrilled to see that as a culture in the school. And by the way, it's a little bit embarrassing, right? Because if I understand the rushing the court for your sectional 5 final win, right? But
Right.
this is a throwaway game against,
Right.
Springport. Like, we're up 30 now because, in
Yeah.
fact, we were up 20 before JMac entered the game. Now we're
Right.
really pounding them because
Right.
JMac's on fire, right?
Right. Right.
So it's a little embarrassing to them, a little bit in some way. And then, and I think now that they get the greater good of it and the story, and I'm sure these kids probably somewhere in the world now, almost 20 years later,
Right.
are saying, I was in that game.
Right.
I'm playing for Springport over here, and
Yeah.
it was crazy,
Right. Absolutely.
and I just think even to have a little bit of part of that story is pretty special.
Yeah. Absolutely. For sure.
Let's talk about this impact. The impact of the story. I mean, you talked about, even briefly, you talked about Good Morning America, Oprah, White House. I mean, who was the president at the time?
Actually, he came to Rochester. It was George Bush.
Oh, he did. He came to Rochester, hung out, got some hoops, did he?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's awesome. So now let's talk about you. You've been a coach, for 15 years at this time. You're an acclaimed coach. You've had 5 years at the sectional run here and a chance to win it all. Athena's become a little bit of a known school now for hoop. They realize they got a good coach, and they're going to be there probably in the end, vying for a position at States. And then, your last decade, as you alluded to, became really strong. You really became a little bit of a powerhouse of
Right.
of kind of the top dog of Section 5 to knock off, if that's fair.
Right. Yeah.
So, what changed? What changed in Coach Johnson previous to the JMac incident? What kind of coach to what kind of coach after?
So I would zero on one thing, and then I'll share one other thing. So the main thing that it took me a long time, I wish I would have understood this, is that I was, I think, one of my things was that my mission was to be an outstanding role model to help others make their dreams come true. And so, but what I didn't realize until the JMac season was that during the postseason, I was putting so much pressure on myself that I wasn't the same person, and the players felt that pressure. And so in close games in those postseason, we would end up finding ways to lose. And I made a pact with myself after JMac's game. I said, I don't care what happens in this postseason. I'm going to be the rock when we handle pressure better. And that's something I really learned. So as I said, in our semifinal, we were up 10 in the third quarter. We completely imploded. The old Coach Johnson would have, lost it. And
the clipboard, would the clipboard go flying a little bit? Maybe a little.
Could be. And
it could be.
And so, but the time, when I called timeout, I was more positive. I said, hey, we know what we need to do. And, and they kind of learned from that, and so that they stuck together, and we ended up rallying and winning. And then, the championship game. And in basketball, you mentioned, hockey is like bigger than basketball in our area. But we play at our downtown arena, and usually we have the different classes for the championship day. And usually we'll get 4,000 or 5,000, about half what the arena for a championship game. We walk in the arena, we're the second to last game, so it was in the evening, and it's sold out. And it's because we had so much publicity. And here we're, so, everybody's following us, and, we start the game, we're down 13-3 after 3 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God. But again, I learned from it. I handled it. I stayed positive, and, they hung together, and we ended up rallying and winning. And that was really the essence of what I learned. And, the kids really started to feed off me, because then we got into a lot of, championship type games. We made the finals 8 times in my last 11 years, and we won 6. And so I think that those are the things I really learned. And the other thing that I think, to build really consistency, is you have to keep growing yourself and keep growing your people. So the 2 things I really focused in is I wanted to keep getting better every year. I was big in my own personal growth. I, listen to a lot of audio programs and go to clinics and, talk to coaches and leaders and that kind of thing. And then the other thing is I really got into that servant leadership mode, where I was really trying to develop my players to be leaders, and with them embracing and being accountable for each other. And when we started to do that, our program really exploded.
Yeah, I don't think the people, and this is, as a growth coach, this is exactly what I do. As going into organizations, I'm typically working with the top 5 to 8, executive leadership in this organization. Okay. But, working that, as you as a coach, I'll know it when you can teach it, right? And so, here I'm going to help you and teach you, but now you're going to have to go teach your department. You're going to have to be the coach. You're going to have to go filter down, and the managers are going to have to go teach that front line. Like, this is our culture. This is how we do things. This is our expectations. What do you want from this thing? Let's help you get what you want. And as each person develops, I mean, the cumulative total of improvement is massive. It's so easy. And that's not a good word to use. I shouldn't say it's so easy, but it's so natural for the entire company to double its value, to triple, to 10x, because this cumulative value that's happening is amazing. One of the things, and I love this lesson, is, and I want everyone to get this, because I've really felt this. I've messed this up in youth baseball. First of all, probably a lot of pressure playing baseball as a kid when you're 12 for the guy who's got 3 World Series rings, right? Man, I don't know how that is, but I'm just like, hey. And I have noticed that, oh man, in our house games, in our house league games, it's fun. It's, we're really trying to make sure everybody gets a spot. We're in a position. And then the travel weekends start, where it's like, hey, this is a higher level, the competition. And I notice how I get when the competition comes rise. And I know my mode, right? Now my mode is, it's no BS, man. It's all business, right?
Yeah.
And the impact on my attitude on my kids, it's like they feel it. They feel my level of whoa, coach just went to here, that. And it's like, and so I noticed that's not always good, because they're feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't want to screw up. I don't want to screw up for the coach. It's like, wait a minute, man. I still need you to play loose, man. You know how to do this, And they're like going, man, all of a sudden I see, the best athletes swinging at balls over their heads, running a fast break when we never run fast break. Wait, what are we doing here? Let baseball passes. Hold on down the court. And it's like turnover, and you're just like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Right. And it's so as a leader, I think this is a great lesson for everybody out there. As a leader, you are going to have impact. And this is why the conditioning is so important. This is why the physical conditioning, to maintain that level through the year, through the season. The mental conditioning of these stresses that'll happen in and out, not only happening for you, but happening to all your kids, which will cause mental duress for you.
Right.
The emotional conditioning that, hey, this is up and down. And I watch college basketball games a lot, Jim, and I'm just like, man, you see these teams locked down and the team hasn't scored for 7.5 minutes. And it's like, you don't have a bucket. Coach has got to be like, did we forget how to play basketball?
Right.
7.5 minutes. It's just this roller coaster of streakiness and streaks that go on and defensive lockdowns, and someone just nails 5 threes. Thank you, Seth Curry. And it's like, man, the hot hand, and it's wild to watch. So there's this emotional roller coaster on, but then there's also this moral conditioning that's happening. How do we be with integrity? We're not, I think there was a challenge back in the day watching watching, during COVID, they showed the Michael Jordan special. I forget what
Yeah.
it was called.
Yeah.
And he's talking about, like, listen, the Pistons are coming after you. They
Right.
literally are going to beat you up. This is what they
Yeah.
want to do. Physically, they want to make you work so hard for a basket.
Right.
It's almost abusive, right? Like
Yeah.
it's almost like, man, like, how do you get ready for this thing? And at
Right.
the end of a season, you're not exactly at your peak physical
Right.
condition, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
The last dance series,
the
right?
Last
Yeah.
Dance,
Yeah.
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 It's really powerful about
Yeah.
how these
It
things
is.
are going. So as a coach, those four tiers have to be so locked in. It's
Yeah.
challenge. It's a much bigger challenge than people know.
Yeah, I agree. So totally. So, a couple ideas, because you hit a lot of great spots as as a leader, you set the tone. So, what is, like, for example, our team mission was to develop winners on and off the court.
Yes.
What our core values were very clear. We were going to respect all people was one of our major core values. That we were going to keep growing every day was another core value. So really teaching them and living out the core values. Then, as far as pressure, a couple of things we did. That number one is we wanted to simulate as much in practice of pressure situations, so our players were getting used to and putting them in awkward things, like sometimes playing our best players against 6-on-5, or just putting them in time and score situations. And then the other thing we did, I'll tell you a quick story. So is we did a lot of mental imagery sessions. And two sides of that, when I retired, my assistant was going to take over for me. He asked me in my exit interviews with all my players of my varsity team, should we keep imagery? And they were so into it, Trent. Every single player said yes. And to give you a quick illustration, my final season, I had a very good player. He ended up playing a couple of years in the NBA. In his senior year, we're in the semifinals, and we're down 3 with under 6 seconds to go, and he gets fouled on a three-pointer, and he makes all 3, and we win in overtime. And I'll never forget, because after the game, the reporter was asking Anthony in the locker room, and I overheard it, and he said, Anthony, what were you thinking? He says, we had done so many imagery sessions, I knew those were going in. And, that just kind of really reinforced the power of the physical preparation, but also the mental preparation.
Yeah, I think that's just super powerful. And I'm sure you've seen the studies on this, right? Like
Mhm.
there's a study in basketball about this
Yeah.
specifically about, I think it was free throws.
Right.
And I think they took the baseline group was, we're going to do nothing.
Right.
Right. And then there's one that was going to go practice like the
Yeah.
100 or the 500 free throws. And then there's the imagery group. And the
Right.
imagery group, like, literally finishes like 1% or 2% behind the physical, right?
Exactly.
Like
Yep.
it's staggering. And I think the other thing that really, as you say this, I'm always reminded of the great coach John Wooden, right? And
Yeah.
and everyone they revere John Wooden, who never won a championship, by the way, in his first 15 years. I don't even think he
Right.
won a Pac-10 championship.
Right.
And he learned as a coach, he's developing his team. And then when he becomes a superstar and he wins, I think, 9 championships in 10 years in the NCAA, everyone comes not to watch the UCLA Bruins play. They come to watch how John Wooden practices,
Yeah.
how he sets up practice.
Yeah.
And that became the big deal. And so that was super powerful to me as we talk about the value of preparation, right?
Right.
And so when you talk about the core values, did you do things to reiterate? Like, did you grab kids and say, hey, that's respecting others. That's a great example of what this looks like. So, because, you could tell kids, hey, respect others, but they may not know actually what those actions are to do that, especially if they
Right.
were not taught that or they're not shown that in their own home. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's a great point. And something that we really emphasized is teaching is a big part of that is showing. So, for example, I would, I'd stop practice and I would criticize and I would compliment. So, for example, if I saw a player dive on the floor for a loose ball, sometimes I'd stop practice, say, hey, that you see what John did? That's what championship players do on championship teams. And then, sometimes I stop or we show on the film, like I'd get on, Jeff and say, Jeff, you didn't run back on defense. And he said, yes, I did. Well, let's see. Let's watch the film.
Let's go to the video, bro. Like I did. As any coach knows, the video does not lie.
Exactly. And so, but I think that the other thing, you made a good point, is that we reinforced by telling them, showing them when they made a mistake. But then I would show another clip and say, John, this is you running back on defense. So they clearly saw the difference, because I think that's an important part of teaching, is getting clarity. I always tell leaders that clarity is in communication is kindness, and that doesn't mean that you're not, kindness doesn't mean soft. It means that they're very clear on what your expectations. You're going to hold them the expectations. You're going to praise them when they do them right, but you're going to correct them when they're not. But I always teach leaders that when correcting, that means, are you teaching them what does right look like? Okay, because we often yell at them because but that's where you got to take it that step further and teach them what correct looks like.
Yeah, and I love that this is what it is. This is what it isn't.
Right.
Back to what it is. Like
Yes.
this is the good way. We're going to reinforce that. And by the way, also, Johnny, you've proved capability, because
Yeah.
I've seen you do it right. So I know you know how to do it right.
Right.
And so you can't say, hey, I wasn't sure how to do it. Like, no. You've already proven capability. We know you can. So I do love that, man. That's really good. Let's talk about the last two things real quick. You talk about, and you kind of touched on a little bit, we're a little bit divided, but there's a culture for that. There's a culture in winning. There's a culture of unity. There's a culture of us moving in alignment towards the same direction. And I have to remind a lot of leaders, alignment is not agreement all the time.
Right.
Well, I don't want, I'm sure, there's probably some kid on the end of the bench, like, why isn't J-Mac starting next game? Well, we're not actually in agreement that he's broke the starting five, right? Like that's not what we're not in alignment how we're going to win this sectional. Exactly. Right. So talk a little bit about that, how important that culture is to you.
Well, culture is we all have them, whether
Yep.
we know it or not. And some
Yeah.
leaders don't realize there is a culture because they kind of ignore it. And that usually leads, because we've seen, effective leaders that can turn businesses, athletic teams around by building that culture. And we see it the other way, where the ship can sink very quickly. So I think, the foundation is getting clarity of the values, clarity of the mission. It's got to be bigger than just winning games, okay, or business, making a profit, although those are certainly important, but it's got to be bigger than that. And that's what you got to be building. The vision is that it's bigger than that, and that we're going to support each other through this journey together. And then culture is built daily. And really, it's what you positively reinforce and what you consistently correct. Okay. And if you let things go, for example, like one of my big things is our players were going to be on time. Now, did a player ever come late? Yes, but there was a consequence.
Yeah.
It was not ignored. Like, I'll give you a quick story. So going back to the best player I ever had, when he was younger, we were in the sectional semifinals. He was a sophomore on the team. It was a really good team. And he comes late for our morning free throws. And so if you come late as a starter, you don't start that night. Now, it's at our big arena. I remember players coming down, Coach, can't you change it? I said, nope. Anthony knows the rule. And the funny part is that the kid I put in for him scored the first 4 points of the game.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm hot, man. Coach, you should do this more often. I should always been here, man.
Exactly.
He's got his chance, man.
But I think that's really, if you want to have a really good culture, you have to have clarity of your standards and, what you're going to promote and what you're going to tolerate, because if you let things slip, it's just amazing. I always hear the stories of the restaurant that, this new restaurant came out and everything was great. And then 2 years later, it was closed, and you didn't see it, but what was happening, just a little slippage, like, the bathrooms weren't clean. Then all of a sudden the silverware wasn't clean and the food wasn't quite as good. And as we know, in any business, if word of mouth gets going in the wrong direction, those businesses end up doing poorly. And it's same with athletic teams, those little things day in and day out, they add up. I always told our players, life accumulates. So today, are you helping yourself or hurting yourself?
Yeah, one of the things I say when people say, well, we don't really know the culture, we're not sure, we don't have a culture. I'm like, well, first of all, let me ask one thing, like, what's not tolerated around here? Oh, well, don't be late for Coach Johnson. I'm like, oh, okay. So like they know that there's some things that aren't tolerated, right? So I'm like, oh, so being on time is pretty important. Like, yeah, Coach Johnson, okay, got that.
Yeah.
So like time management is going to be an important deal. And I bet practice runs on time. And I bet we're going to do everything on time. Like, yeah, we watch the clock, right? Got it. Okay. So he's reinforcing that. Then what is it that we cumulatively do that absolutely creates value?
Yeah.
And as an organization, we have to understand, like, why would people buy our product? Why would they come to our games? How do we win as a team? Like, whatever the value is that we're going to measure on, like, we better know that.
Right.
And when you do meet people and they don't know in the organization, it's terrifying, right? Like, because you're like, why do you come every day? They pay me. I don't. It's like, whoa, there's a bigger work here, and I can see why maybe you haven't grown and changed and developed over the years, because you haven't directed these people and reinforced the value and importance and how you contribute to the world too, because that product, helps somebody get down the stairs, or it does this, or whatever that is, and the impact it's having. You should understand that, like as a person who produces that. So I love it, man. Let's end this here. You have a quick hot, like 3-5 list of like the key things that you feel like leaders, these are the non-negotiables for a leader.
So I think the first thing is you have to build trust. Okay. We always talk about that. One of the things I challenge leaders, I do a leadership presentation, I do a team culture presentation. And in those, I talk about how many believe that trust is important. It's 100% hands, no matter where I speak in the country. But then I challenged them. I said, well, how many of you have an intentional plan of how you're going to build trust? And then I talk about our 3 keys to building trust. And that's how we were able to do that. So if you don't build trust, your organization is going to slide. So that's where I think is essential. Next thing is, I think you have to model the behaviors that you expect. And if you're not a good model, I think that comes back to bite you. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing is I think that you really got to have a mindset that how you're going to continue to grow and how you can grow your team members and help them be leaders. I build that into a servant leadership model, that every day I'm trying to grow myself and grow others. And if you keep that mindset, that famous 1%, trying to get a little bit better each day. But it goes back to what I said earlier, life is going to accumulate. And if you let things a little slip each day, then by the end of the season, or, things are bad. The other thing, if you're getting a little bit better each day, it's amazing. And the last thing I'll say is overall in building trust, to me, it means that you're focused on caring and building relationships. And that's why I really encourage leaders to make sure that you have one-on-ones. Like one of the things we always did is after we had our team goals meeting, I met with every player one-on-one. We talked about their individual goals and how we could synchronize them with the team goals. And I think as a leader, you got to be aware of what are their individual needs and how we can synchronize that as a group.
Love it. I love it. For everybody out there today, thank you so much for joining us. Me, leading winning teams. This is the book, my book, right? And of course, you have Jim Johnson, Coach Jim Johnson's book, A Coach and a Miracle. I want you to all go out and pick that. For everybody who joins us, Winners Find a Way live every Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. We run our show with full video and on our Leadershipity YouTube channel. And then, of course, the full podcast drops every Friday on all the major networks, Apple, Spotify, Our Heart, etc. So until next time, we will see you then. Winners find a way.